Hello, college success students. Hope all is well with you and your families. We are going to do cover chapter 8 today, so you can follow along in your book as I go through the slides. And at the end of the presentation, I'm also going to go over the career research paper in depth. So please make sure you watch through the end of the video today. Let me share my screen and we'll jump right in here. All right. So as you see here, we are covering chapter 8, which discusses reading, writing, and presenting. This is why I'm going to go over the career research paper today, because it kind of follows the theme for this chapter. And it's really about time in the semester where you need to be thinking about really getting going on finding your sources, planning out your paper, and writing it. You have plenty of time. You've got about four or 5 weeks left in the semester at this point to get it done. So let's get started here. We'll start in section 8.2. Again, if you want to follow along in your book, you can do that. A couple highlights from section 8.2. The main thing here is reading is here to stay. Whether you enjoy reading or not, it's just a huge skill in your high school classes, if you're a high school student, in college classes, and beyond into your career, any further training. You're going to have to do a lot of reading. It's a skill that you need to develop. So if you hate reading, it's not going away. You're going to have to keep working at it and become a more critical reader. You don't have to be someone who loves to read novels and does that in your spare time, but you're going to have to read and read critically in every area of your life and in every subject in school. One study shows that 85% of what you learn in a college class requires careful reading. So if you're going to be successful in college, you're going to have to focus on your reading skills. Section 8.3a, just a couple quick highlights from this section in your book. One strategy to become a better reader is to make friends with a dictionary. And dictionaries these days are not big honking books that you carry around. Most people can find online dictionaries pretty easily. And when you're reading something and you run across a word, go right to a dictionary online and maybe even create a folder in your phone on a note section where you're adding new words. We talked about note taking in the past, just physically writing a note on your phone with the word, with the definition. It's going to help solidify that word so that you can incorporate it into your everyday vocabulary. So section 8.4, we're going to spend the bulk of our time going through some highlights in this section. Talks about several different reading essentials. We're going to cover the first 9 that are especially important in this section. The first one are really thinking about what should your goal be when you're reading? What is the purpose of reading? The goal is understanding. Okay, you want to understand what you're reading. You don't want to finish what you're reading and just say, I finished it, I have no clue what I read. That's not the purpose. The purpose is going through the process, a lot of information coming in, and you want to understand what you're reading. So again, just completing a reading assignment or finishing a book and turning all the pages and getting through it, that's not enough. Good readers are people who backtrack, reread things. They realize, what, I just read a whole page or a whole paragraph. I have no clue what I just read. I got to reread it. That doesn't mean you're a bad reader or you're a slow reader. It means you're a good reader. That's what critical readers do, is they reread, they backtrack, they question, they answer, analyze things as they read, and it takes time. So the idea of speed reading, it's not really necessarily good reading. Sometimes you in school, you've had classmates who you've seen, zipping through an assigned reading material, and you think, oh, they must be really smart. They must really know what they're doing. It's not necessarily the case. Maybe they're really not understanding what they're reading and they're just trying to get through it fast. So you really need to be focused. Focus is important. And your goal should not be be a speed reader, but to be a speed understander. As understand as quickly as you can, which may mean taking more time to read than you normally would. So focus on understanding and take as much time as it takes to read and reread things in order to get to that point. So we need to understand that we all have challenges as readers. You know, none of us are perfect and just brilliant when we begin reading, especially. And we've talked in previous lessons, the more you read, the more you practice, the better you're going to get at it. But section 8.4, the second point, lists a few examples of challenges that many of us deal with. I'm just going to read a couple of them. So sometimes we just get bored. Sometimes it's fluency. Fluency is we're stumbling over the words. We're not familiar with some of the words, and it's hard to read smoothly through a passage because we're kind of stumbling with reading the words properly in our head or out loud. Sometimes it's vocabulary. I'm not going to go through all of them. Sometimes we just get tired. It wears us out. There's a lot of different challenges that we deal with. We're distracted. We fall asleep, whatever it might be. But we all have our challenges. We need to know what those things are. If you're someone, you know, that every time you read, you get tired and you want to take a nap, well, then you need to put yourself in a position to be successful. Don't read in bed. All right. Don't read at night. Don't read laying down. Just be smart about it and sit up straight, be in a comfortable, you know, comfortable, but not a sleep-inducing position, and make sure you're setting yourself up for success when you're reading, and not thinking through the challenges you deal with and how that might affect your reading environment. So take a look at some of those in section 8.4 and just be aware of how those affect you as a reader and how you can combat some of those challenges. It's really astounding. One of the things in this section that it discusses is how many brain activities are involved in the reading process. There's quite a bit. Okay, so the first thing is with your eyes. You're merely taking in symbols. All right, you're looking at these symbols and these words and these sentences and paragraphs. For someone who speaks a different language, it means nothing. It's just symbols on a page. Imagine looking at a page of Chinese characters. If you don't know how to read Chinese, that's what our brain is decoding as an English, as most of us are English speakers. There's a lot to decode there. Our brain has been trained and we've learned the process over years, but our brain is doing that. Our brain is taking those symbols, they're transferring those visual cues and those symbols to our brain and translating them to meaningful signals, okay, things that our brain can understand. And then we're using that meaning to think about it as we're reading, to speak about it, to respond, to write about it. So there's so many processes that our brain is doing while we're reading. It is a challenge. There's a lot going on, and it's a tiring process, especially in an academic setting. Number 3 is, you know, we need to understand that there's different styles of reading. We need to be flexible as a reader. The text gives the analogy of fast food versus fine dining. So fast food kind of reading would be, you know, like a magazine, lighter reading, all right? Magazines, newspapers, even reading over a restaurant menu or even a novel that it's not super intense in terms of the reading level. You really enjoy the reading. You can fly through it quickly. You don't have to reread and think critically. You're just enjoying the book. That's more of the lighter side of reading. In an academic setting, we're going to call this the fine dining reading. You know, you're reading textbooks, a science textbook, a history textbook. You can't read that like you would a magazine article or a novel that you really enjoy. You have to take it slower. You need to reread. You need to think and ask questions while you're reading. If you're reading, you know, maybe a professor gives you a whole several pages of notes or information. Again, you're going to have to take your time through that, and it's not the same speed, it's not the same concentration level or focus level as you would, you know, some other lighter reading materials. So when you're reading, a great strategy is to kind of converse with the author in your head, to be thinking about what the author's purpose is, to argue, have an argument. I don't agree with that. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder where they're coming with that. Ask questions of the author. You can agree, disagree, relate what they're saying to your life. It's just a way of turning on your brain and turning on your thinking process as you're reading, so that it makes more sense and you're able to comprehend it better. And just remember this, I've mentioned this already, that it's critical reading and critical thinking, it's a process, it's an active process. Your brain is turned on, it's not passive. You can't just sit back. If you're not in the mood, if you're tired, if you're hungry, if your brain is somewhere else, you might as well just not read at the time. Wait till you're in a better frame of mind, because you're not going to get much out of it if you're trying to read some, the fine dining academic level reading, if your brain is not tuned in and ready to really focus. So some strategies for reading. Dissect the text. So actually, while you're reading, if it's a textbook that you purchased, or it's a book that you're allowed to write in, literally write in the text in the margins some notes about what and why. The what, maybe just write a quick little 1-sentence summary next to each paragraph as you're reading for an assigned reading in one of your classes. The why, think about what the author's purpose is and kind of summarize that with 1 sentence when you finish reading. If you don't want to write, at least think about these things. How would you summarize what you wrote? What would you think? What do you think about the author's purpose? Just have that kind of dialogue going on in your head as you're reading. In addition to writing in your books or in the margins of notes or something like that, actually writing out full-fledged notes in a notebook. Okay, we talked about, I think last week, that physically writing notes down, it helps you retain knowledge. So if you're reading, have a notebook with you and just be taking notes. Again, even if you never read those notes again and you're not going to study from them, just keeping track of what you're reading while you're taking notes is a brain activity that's going to solidify that knowledge. So when you're reading, sometimes there are cultural nuances to the information you're reading, and if you don't understand the culture or the history or some of the vocabulary that's being spoken of because of the culture, you're going to have to do some background research. So there might be mentions of some TV show that you've never heard of before, and some quote that doesn't make any sense to you, or some piece of information from the 1970s or some era that you weren't around in and you don't understand it. Well, again, we have a plethora of resources in terms of information finding through our access to technology and to the internet. So look things up. So make sure you understand what you're reading if there are some of those cultural contexts in what you're reading. Number 8 talked about the SQ3R reading strategy. Okay, so this is a strategy that maybe you've seen before in an English class. I'm going to go through what the SQ3R acronym stands for. The S stands for survey. Okay, so you're gonna skim the whole text. If you are assigned a chapter in a textbook, before you start actually reading it, just skim through the whole thing. Look at the headings, look at the structure, kind of get an idea what the purpose of the writing is as you kind of survey the entire assignment. And then ask yourself some questions before you start reading. What is this whole text about? What's the purpose that it's being written? Why is it included in my assigned reading? Why do I have to read this? And how might I use this information? So those are questions you're going to be asking kind of throughout the process of reading. So that's the cue. And there are 3 R's. The first one is, okay, so you're going to read. You're going to read the entire passage and get through that reading. Again, take your time. You're going to have to do some rereading. You're going to have to pause and think and analyze what you're reading as you do that. And then you're going to recite in your own words. Okay, you can do it out loud. You can write it out, but you're gonna put what you read and kind of recite it in your own words. And the last R is review. So you're going to summarize what you learned. Okay, so just a whole overarching summary of kind of the main points of what you learned. So that's the SQ3R strategy. Again, it's a reading comprehension strategy. That's the purpose of reading, is to understand what you've read. And this is just a strategy that can help you do that. If you think it's something you might benefit from, give it a try. Again, the more work and time and effort with notes and using some of these strategies that you use, it's just going to help you be a speed understander. Okay, you might think, why would I do all this? This is so much work. I don't want to put that much work into reading. Well, you might end up putting more work in because you have to read and reread so many times because you're really not grasping it, or you've put minimal time in and you're just not going to do as well in a class because of that. One other mention in this section under point 8 is reading out loud is a great strategy to become a better reader. It helps you with fluency. Again, just the flow of reading and being able to read properly certain words and new vocabulary. It just kind of helps you to hear. You know, when you're reading in your head, you're only using your eyes and your brain. Okay, but when you read out loud, you're using your auditory skills with your own voice and your hearing, your verbal skills, your auditory skills, and your eyes. So there's more brain activity going on there that can help with understanding. So number 9 talks about certain language that's included in different subjects, and you need to understand that each subject has its own language, its own vocabulary, its various perspectives. So if you're reading a biology text, there's a lot of words in there that you're not going to see in everyday reading and everyday language. You're going to have to look up new words, make sure you understand the definitions, and get to know the context of what you're reading in that kind of setting. So if you don't understand those terms, you're really not going to understand at all what you're learning. So make sure you learn those terms. All right, section 8.6 talks about the writing process. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is really what you're going to need to go through for your career research paper. You have to go through this process if you want to do the assignment completely and do it well. The first step is pre-writing. You have to do this, okay, for an essay, for a research project like you're doing in this class. You have to do the pre-writing step. You have to think ahead. You got to think about what the purpose is of what you're writing, plan out how you're going to do it, prepare, getting the materials that you need, getting your sources. Again, think through the purpose. Why am I writing this? What am I trying to answer here? Is it just information? Am I arguing a certain point? You're thinking about your audience. Okay, who am I writing this to? What's the best way I can convey this information to my audience? Think about a thesis. For this class, your research paper is mostly information about your career and all sorts of information about it. There's not so much a thesis about that, but a thesis would be more in an argumentative paper where you're trying to convey a certain point. But you also need to think through what research is needed. Okay, this is where the planning comes in. You're looking through the criteria and the requirements for your paper, and you're saying, okay, I can answer that right now. Okay, these things I need to do some research. I need to find sources to find answers to those questions. So you need to figure out before you start writing which questions you need to get answered and what sources you need to answer those questions. And then another practical step is coming up with some target due dates. Okay, when is the final paper due? And then let's backtrack and give some some level due dates up until that point. When am I going to finish my research and have all my sources? When am I going to have this section done? When am I going to have my first draft done so I can start reviewing it and editing it? So coming up with some target due dates before you start writing. Okay, then the writing process. All right, this is not an English class. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how to write. This is something that you've learned in your ELA classes throughout your life as a student. But one just kind of real practical strategy is mean, writing takes thinking. All right. You're gonna think about what you want to write. You got to think about it first. Then if you can actually speak it, if you can say it out loud or rehearse it in your brain, okay, think through what you want to say and make sure that it makes sense, that it's coherent in English with proper grammar. So if you can think it and speak it, well, then you can write it and write exactly what you're thinking. All right. If you need help with this process, there is a writing center at HFC. You can literally Google HFC Writing Center. I'm going to go to that link right now. You can make an appointment as an HFC student. You're able to do that. Now, they're not going to just, show you how to write your paper. They're going to want you to come with something written, things already down, and you're basically coming to just get maybe unstuck. You're asking for some support in, what's the best way to approach this problem that I'm having, or what issues are you having? So it's really how to get unstuck or solve certain problems that you're struggling with in the writing process. But it is available to all of you, even if you're a dual enrollment student. You can access the Writing Center for any college class that you're taking. All right, let me stop sharing and make sure that I'm on the right slide here. Okay, so don't hesitate to reach out to that. It is going to take some forethought. You can't just last minute contact the Writing Center and get the help. So, you might want to get a jump start on this. If you need the extra help, you can do that. So the next step is rewriting. All right, so a lot of students hate doing this part. All right, they get the paper done, they want to be finished, they want to just turn it in. Well, you're going to have mistakes if you do that. All right, if you don't get some feedback, from a trusted friend or a parent or relative who can edit your paper and make sure there's no mistakes in it. But you can do the same thing just by, this is a great strategy. Again, out loud, read your paper out loud, word for word, read the whole thing. As you read it word for word, and you got to be careful because sometimes you might miss mistakes because you wrote the paper, and you might just gloss over a mistake because you know what you meant to say, but you didn't actually say it in the paper. That's why reading it out loud, read every word exactly as written, and you might realize, oh, I forgot to write the word "to" in that sense. I thought it, but I didn't write it, and it's not there, and it doesn't make sense right now. So rereading your paper out loud to yourself is going to help you edit your own papers and make necessary changes if need be. All right, section 860 talks about the 7 C's for better writing. This will be our last piece of information for this chapter before I go into the career research paper. So number 1, the first C is to be clear. All right, you just want to be saying exactly what you mean to say and mean what you want to say. All right, so you're not going to go off into tangents and be all wordy and say a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. Okay, just be clear with what you're saying. Don't try to impress your teachers with these fluffy words and going on and on. Don't overcomplicate things. Just be clear and say what you want to say. Be complete. That's the next C. So you got to make sure that if you're making a claim or you're giving some piece of information, you're backing it up with sufficient details, with background information. Don't leave the reader hanging and thinking, oh, well, how did you come up with that idea? Where did that come from? Be complete in the details you're providing. Think about how the reader is reading what you're writing. Okay, put yourself in the reader's shoes. Don't assume that they know things. And if you thought something that was some background information that you're assuming that they know, write about it. Put that in your paper. Make sure the next C is be correct. You got to check your grammar. You got to check punctuation, spelling, fluency of your writing. Make sure it just kind of flows from sentence to sentence and it's easy to read. The next C is to be concise. Sometimes writing less is more. Again, that's similar to number one, to be clear. Don't try to be overly impressive with writing on and on and on and on and on, saying the same thing in different ways over and over again. Okay. Professors, English teachers, they're not going to want to read that. They just want you to get to the point and say what you want to say. Now, that doesn't negate what I was saying with number two, with providing sufficient background information. What it means is don't repeat yourself and just add a bunch of fluff that doesn't really mean anything. Just stay focused on what your goal is in writing. Number five, the next C is be compelling. Okay, so you want your writing to be interesting. There are different ways of saying the same thing. Try to write in a way that is easy to read, that's interesting, that paints a picture of what you're thinking and has vivid details. Keep the reader engaged in what you're writing, so that they want to keep reading. You're probably not writing creative novels or poems. You're writing informational essays for the most part, but even in that context, you can still write in a way that's interesting, that's engaging, so that your readers want to keep reading. Number six, just a practical thing here, is to be courteous. All right, especially when you're writing emails and texts. Sometimes when you have a distance from your audience and you've got your fingers on a typewriter or a computer, and you're tempted to show your emotions, your frustrations, just lashing out in a moment. Make sure you're being respectful when you're writing, especially in those contexts, and on your papers too. Just keep aware of your audience and how they might receive information. Number seven, the last one, is be convincing. So again, this is mostly in a persuasive essay format, similar to being complete. Number two, you have to give specific facts, examples to back up your points. And one of the things that most instructors are looking for is multiple sources of evidence to support your claim. Okay, so the more evidence, the better. All right, so let's get into your career research paper. We're done covering chapter 8. Again, in these lectures, I don't cover the whole thing. You need to read the entire chapters, but that's kind of a quick summary of the main points from chapter 8. So your career research paper, where are you going to find the information and the requirements for the career research paper? It is in your syllabus. Okay, so it is linked in the Moodle page, or hopefully you printed it out. If you printed it out, you can just go right to your syllabus. So again, let me stop sharing and I'll reshare with the research paper. Okay, so this is the biggest chunk of points that you're going to have in this class. It's 150 points. As you can see here, it should be 5 to 7 pages. Now you might say, well, wow, that's a lot. I've never written a paper that long, or maybe you have. Well, it's double spaced. Okay, so it's going to be double spaced. You're not going to have too much trouble coming up with 5 to 7 pages. If you're writing in complete sentences, you're using fluency like I just talked about. You're kind of allowing your words to flow and your sentences to flow, and having good transitions, not just answering the questions with one statement, but kind of elaborating on the statements and including details. If you answer all the questions that are required for this paper, you're not going to have trouble coming up with 5 to 7 pages. Okay, so the first section, basically the way this paper is going to work is you're going to answer all these questions. Okay, and if you wanted to kind of split it up into paragraphs, you've got part 1, part 2, part 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 6 is works cited, so you've got 5 different sections here. If you spent 1 to 2 paragraphs in each section, you're going to come up with 4 or 5 pages, no problem with that, and then your works cited. So the first section is the introduction. You're basically describing what career you want to go into, what career you want to go into. And if you're not sure, if you're debating between a couple different careers, Okay, for this assignment, just pick one. So just pick an assignment that you are going to focus on for this, pick a career that you're going to focus on for this assignment. So you're going to include a brief history of how you came to choose your career. Some students get confused about that, and they think that they're coming up with a history of the career and explaining, when did it start and what are some key people who did this, this kind of job. That's not what this is. This is the history for you. How did you come up with this kind of career path? Where did it start in your life? When did you start thinking about this? You don't need a source for that. Obviously, that's your information. You're not going to look for a citation for that, because that's just coming from you. And along with that, did someone inspire you? Number 2 here. How did that happen? Who was it? What was the process for that happening? Number 3, are there specific personality types that are, or skills that are required? So that's something that you might need to do some research on and find a source to look through what kind of skills are involved, what kind of personality traits might be helpful in this kind of career. Let me just back up for just a sec. The whole purpose of this essay, this research paper, is for you to get more information about the career you're interested in, and maybe finding out, man, this really isn't the career for me. And if that's accomplished during this paper, well, that's a great result. It's not something you want to do, and you can look into other things. Or maybe after writing this paper, you realize, wow, this really does match up with me as a person, my skills, my personality types, and I'm more and more convinced that it's what I want to go into. So that's really the next question, number 4. Is this career a match for you in terms of your personality, your interests, your values, your skills? And you're going to provide a rationale from the in-class assessments you completed. Okay, so that means you're going to look at the Focus 2. Okay, look at the Focus 2 assessment and see if your personality traits, your skills, and your work assessment that you came up with, does it match up with this career based on the research that you found? We also did some other little mini assessments in class that you could use to relate to this question here. Okay, so that's the first section, the introduction. The next one is, what are the part 2? What are the requirements to get into your career? What are some of the job trends in the area that you're looking into? So job trends are what's new, what's happening lately, what's going on in this career, what are some advances, what are some things that are changing. So what are job trends? What type of education do you need? All right, do you need a bachelor's degree? Do you need an associate degree? Do you need to get a certificate of or special training? Do you need a PhD or a doctorate degree? What kind of education? How high do you need to go in your education? And then what college will you go to? Okay, again, you don't have to have this perfectly figured out. Just give an idea. What college would you like to go to? What are some on your list? Think through some of that. How much will your education cost? All right, you're going to have to do some research here. You need to look up, online. You can Google, Wayne State cost of attendance. You're going to find information on that and get an idea. If you know how long you're going to go, if it's 4 years, how much is it going to cost total in all 4 years? This is something you need to know as you're looking into your career and how much it's going to take to get into that. Number 9, how long will it take to complete your degree? So is it 4 years? Is it 8 years? You going to medical school, an internship? How long is it going to take you? Do you need to get some special license? Number 10, do you need a special license? Do you have to take a certification exam to be able to get into this career? Explain that. Okay. All right. I do want to see a mention of all of these questions in your research paper. That's what I'm looking for when I'm grading it. Okay. This is not an English class. I'm not going to grade you so much on, is this just amazing writing and paper? I want to see that you're answering these questions. So even if number 10, if you don't need a license, mention that. Okay. There's no license required to work in this field. Okay. Just so I see that you've answered all the questions. Part 3, you're going to describe some of the details of the job. Again, this is where you're probably going to need to do some research to answer this. So you're going to answer what specific job within your career do you want to go into? So if you're saying, I want to be a doctor, well, what kind of doctor you want to be? There's all sorts of doctors, an ER doctor, family practice. You want to be a surgeon, or, you know, sports medicine, whatever kind of area you want to go into. If you're going into business, are you going to go into marketing, accounting, finance, supply chain? You know, you're gonna answer what specific kind of job you want to go into. If you had to pick today, okay, I know you don't have your whole life figured out, but if you had to pick today, what kind of specific job would you want within your career area? What kind of job duties are you going to go into? What specific day-to-day tasks are you going to be doing? What type of company you're going to work for? Do some thinking about this and research. Are you going to have to relocate? You know, is your job going to have to take you to some other state, some other country in order to do this kind of job? You're going to need to do some research on salary. Are you going to be paid with an annual salary? Are you going to be paid hourly? What kind of income would you expect? And is there room for advancement? Okay, advancement is kind of moving on to the next level within your career. Are there opportunities to move up in your career and become, you know, more advanced in salary, in position, maybe moving up to a management position or supervisor? What kind of opportunities are there to advance in your career? Number 4, you know, you're going to write a paragraph here on what are some of the concerns or the current issues that are a challenge in this area, in this field. And it doesn't necessarily have to be challenged, but what issues are people dealing with? What are some of the concerns and issues that people with in this career are dealing with? So write, you know, 2, 3, 4 sentences about that for number 4. Okay. Number 5, how are you going to get there? All right. How are you going to get into this career? So think about some of the big employers in the field, who are some of the major companies that are hiring in this area. What are some of the obstacles that you think, number 19, that you're going to need to overcome? Okay. So what are some, what challenges you're going to face that are going to get in the way of you completing your education and getting in this career? And related to that, if you've got challenges, how are you going to overcome those? What are some resources you can use? They could be people, they could be you know, resources that we talk about on campus at a college. They could be resources within your own self that you know that you have. So what are some resources you're going to use to get the help that you need to overcome challenges and move through this career and this education? And then are there any professional associations? Last thing, number 21, what are some associations you could join if you're in this career? So a lot of different career areas have organizations where people can connect and be part of a community of people within that career. And again, if there isn't one that you can find, just mention that in your paper so that I know that you at least took a look at that question. Okay. The 6th part is your works cited. We're going to be using MLA format. Okay. And in your syllabus, I kind of outlined what it looks like. I'm going to go through it in our last slide here. So you're going to have the author, you're going to have the title of the book or the article, the place of publication, the publisher, and the date. And actually, let me stop this here. So this is the paper. Okay. So if you answer all those questions and you go through and you write with some fluency, you're checking your work and making sure you're covering all those points, you're pretty much going to get full credit. All right. And then again, you need to have this works cited. This is part of it. So you need at least 5 sources. All right. You need at least 5 sources. Most of them are going to be online. You can use an online encyclopedia. I'd like you to use at least one. I'd like you to try to find at least one professional journal. Okay. So these can be, again, you just Google this information, depending on your career, look up a journal in that area, and you should be able to find that. All right. So of the 5, one should be an actual book or encyclopedia. It could be an online source for that, and then a professional journal. All right. So let's talk about citations real quick, how you're going to cite your sources. Okay, so again, citation should be MLA format. The first thing you're going to write is the author, then the title of the source in quotations, the title of the container. The container is what did it come from? Sometimes it's an article within a whole journal. Sometimes it's in a whole, big book with lots of different articles or information in it. The next is other contributors, other authors, then the version, the number, the publisher, publication date, and finally the location. Now, all that sounds pretty confusing. All right, so there are some sources of information that you can use to find this information. And a lot of this is going with a journal article, with published journals that are peer reviewed. The container, the version number, a lot of that comes from that kind of setting. So some things don't have that, but I'm going to share. And the other thing is, in terms of format, you are going to lose points if you don't do this. Okay, you got to be formatted correctly. After the first line of the source, the second line and all the following lines should be indented. Okay, so that's the way it should look when you do the MLA format. I'm going to show you what that looks like using Scribr. You may be familiar with this. I will allow you in this class to use a Scribr citation generator. And again, you can literally Google Scribr MLA citation generator, and you're going to get this site here. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare just to make sure that I'm sharing the right screen here. Okay, so if you Google Scribr MLA citation generator, it'll take you here, and you can just put it in a website based on a journal or article that you read, and you click on cite and it takes you right to it. So let me open up a new screen here, and I'm just gonna put in, let's say I already did this. So software engineering trends in 2022. I'm just gonna Google and see what we can find here. Now this one up here, I see the word blog. I don't want to use a blog. All right, blog could just be one person who's ranting about their own ideas. Infoworld.com. Here's datacentral.com, top 12 software developments trends in 2022. So I'm going to look at this one here. It's pretty recent, from January 2022. All right, so I'm going to take a look. This might be of use for my paper if I'm doing software engineering. So I'm going to copy this link here. I'm going to go back to the generator and paste that article here and click on cite. Okay, so it came up with this article, and it's basically asking me, is this the article that I'm looking for? And yep, that looks pretty much what I'm looking for. So I'm going to click on that. And then here's the works cited entry. Okay, this is MLA format. It's already done. It's got the author, the title, the source, the date, the website. Everything's in there the way it should be done for a website. So for the purpose of this class, it is fine to use this kind of works cited generator. The Scribr site has a lot of information about MLA formatting and APA formatting, and you can go through it and look at more information about how to cite properly. But for the purpose of this class, if I were you, I would just use this. And if you log in through Google, if you kind of create an account, log in through Google, you can actually save all your citations in there to the clipboard. It says here, copy to clipboard, and all your citations will be there that you use, and just copy that to your paper, and that should look fine. So you see how the second line is indented. That is proper MLA format. Each new citation is going to start on the far left and then be indented after the second line. Okay. All right. That is all I have for today. I know I covered quite a bit with going over the paper, but that is important for your grade and your task in this class. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me or come to office hours. All right. Have a great week.